I want to say a couple of things. So Walter Mosley doesn't need really an introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. The author of more than 50 critically acclaimed books, including his best-selling series, which we talked about a little bit before, Easy Rawlins. His work's been translated into 25 languages, includes literary fiction, science fiction, political monographs, and a young adult novel, which I think speaks to what I said before about this book and a writer like Walter, who very importantly, I think, defies those kind of categories that I think are very limiting. In 2013, he was inducted into the New York State Writers Hall of Fame, the winner of numerous awards, including an O. Henry Award, Mystery Writers of America Grand Master Award, a Grammy, a PEN American's Lifetime Achievement Award. He divides his time between New York and Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I guess so right now. I live in New York, but I've been in LA a lot because I've been working in writers' rooms, which...
Oh, I was going to wait, and maybe
You can listen. Wait.
Well, I was going to wait for this. Let's wait on this.
Oh, okay. Let's wait on that.
Maybe some of you read the... see, this is like a good mystery writer. Something we have to wait for. So, Elements of Fiction, this is your second book that we could say is a kind of craft book.
Right. This year you write your novel and then Elements of Fiction, yeah.
Right. So... I'm just curious. I read it, so I know some of these answers. But like, what drew you to writing this, and what interests you most about writing these kinds of books?
Well, when you're a writer, people ask you about writing, a lot, and they say, "How do I write my novel? How do I finish my novel? How do I know when my novel is finished?" I always loved that answer because I always say, "Well, you write it, and then you rewrite it, and then you rewrite it." You read it, and you say, well, this is wrong, I'll fix it. And read it, this is wrong, I'll fix it. And read it, this is wrong, I'll fix it. Finally, you read it and go, this is wrong, but I don't know how to fix it. So then it must be finished. So you put it out there. But and in this year you write your novel, which is it's, I wouldn't say it's simplistic, but it's anybody can come to that book and go through the steps, and something will come out at the end. The novel, whether or not it can be published, another question. One of the things that I came up with in that book that I really liked was that somebody said, well, what's plot? And I said, well, it's the structure of revelation, right? It's when you say what to your reader, and I like that a lot, and I just kept thinking about it, and so that led me into writing what I call a deeper dive into writing fiction. Yeah.
Well, because you actually talk about that, about structure and about revelation, and but I'm going to move to a later question, but you talk about rewriting, and you actually, let me just set this up. One of the things I really like about this book is it's not a how-to book, it's not a manual, and what you do throughout the book, and I think you do, is the way you sort of talk about craft or different elements of writing fiction is you tell a story about it. So when you talk about rewriting, you talk about how we wish we said X, or if, which I thought was hilarious and great. And so you are a big rewriter, and
yeah, the only person I ever knew who really wasn't was Gloria Naylor. Remember, I talked to her about rewriting, and she goes, and it was so funny because we were talking about a screenplay she was writing. And she said, oh my God, this is so hard. I have to write it again and again and again, all these changes and again. And I said, well, it's like writing a novel, right? She goes, you rewrite novels? And I said, don't you? She goes, oh no, I just write it and that's it. And I went, wow, that's really amazing. So in some of her work, the Women of Brewster Place is just an extraordinary. It's a collection of stories, but it's also a novel. And, but almost everybody I know rewrites because, right?
Oh, yeah. You say something about the fact that, I'm going to get the words wrong, but that your first sort of putting things down is just garbled stuff. That you have this luxury and this opportunity to rethink and re-say what you want to say.
Yeah. I think, and that you wish you had it in life,
Yeah.
But you don't. You say, God, why did I say that? You go out on this date and you just keep talking about yourself the whole time. You come back and say, wow, I talked about myself the whole time. No wonder they said, no, drop me off at the corner, because but that's good, because you make all those mistakes, and in writing fiction you make those mistakes, but you can fix them. In life you can't, and it's probably good that you can't, but you never know it at the time.
Well, you talk about that, and I enjoyed that very much when you talked about I mean, you gave those examples about, just that bad. Also, okay, I'm just going to ask you a bunch of things from your book.
Okay.
So, in the introduction, you use the word condensation.
Yeah.
Can you define that? What you mean by that in fiction writing?
Well, the idea of writing fiction, so much of fiction is description. You have to put what the character looks like, where the character is, what the place looks like, what time of day it is, there's all these things. If I were, for instance, to try to describe this room exhaustively, it would be thousands of pages. Just like, just everybody's face, and then the chairs, and then the temperature, and the window, and the reflections in the window. And, there's all these things that are happening in just a small place. I mean, Grand Central Station. So what you have to do is you have to keep on making it smaller and smaller. So it's not condensation like water, but, you have to condense what you're writing to the place where you're only saying what's absolutely important, but at the same time, it doesn't seem absolutely important. It seems, well, he's just throwing facts out there, but they're going to work. They're going to help create that world for the reader. That's it's so difficult, which is why we need to study poetry, because poetry is the absolute master of bringing everything down to just the right word or 2 words or 3 words. And, that's what you have to do.
Okay. Well, you jumped ahead to something I was going to ask you, because I love this. In your book, you talk about poetry. It's a very short little chapter. Let me see if I can find. See, when you have Post-its, it's like they're all
they get in the
same. Hold on. Well, you talk about poetry as it's somebody you may know from your past.
Who's that?
Jan Heller-Levy, the
I know
poet.
Jan. Yeah, sure. She's in Switzerland now, right? Yeah.
She lives in Switzerland, and she helped me with my first novel. And she gave me certain things that I always think of as, I don't know, I fall back on them. But anyway, you say here about poetry and description as poetry and how important that is. And then you have a poem here. Would you be able to read this poem if I give it to you? Have your glasses?
I can try.
Okay.
Yeah. I always prepared to read things. I always obsess me when I have to read. But this poem, I love this poem. I've read it so many times. The great thing about this poem is the title. It's a really tiny little poem, but the title is "Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's Farm in Pine Island, Minnesota." And it's amazing. It's like, that's so long. Over my head, I see the bronze butterfly asleep on the black trunk, blowing like a leaf in green shadow. Down the ravine, behind the empty house, the cowbells follow one another into the distances of the afternoon. To my right, in a field of sunlight between 2 pines, the droppings of last year's horses blaze up into golden stones. I lean back as the evening darkens and comes on. A chicken hawk floats over, looking for home. I have wasted my life. Love that poem.
You chose this poem to put in here. Can you tell us a little bit why, and in relation to description that you talk about, and in this poem in particular?
Well, when you talk about condensing, like this, he actually condenses not only an entire lifetime, but like the world that has surrounded him for so long that he's never seen, and he brings it to he gives it meaning. There's a whole list of things, and then there's a meaning at the end, which one I don't think would ever expect. Like, I realize now that I've been like all of these creatures, just following my instinct, following my habit, following the world, and I've never stopped to pay attention to how beautiful it is. And I think that's gorgeous, And if you can, if you can do that in a paragraph in a novel, you're really doing great. With so many novels, so much nonfiction, it's just like, well, all I have to do is tell them what happens. And no, you have to help people experience what happened, and to have somebody experience it is it's difficult in a first draft. But listen, I mean, this poem is based on another poem, and you know, that's weeks, if not months, of work right there.
Yeah. And would you say that poetry has been, literally reading poetry has been helpful to you in your work?
Actually, I studied writing poetry. I'm really bad at it. Just in case, if you want to see my poems, you can, because they're really bad. I get embarrassed reading my poems. I look at them and go, oh my God, I remember that. So I studied with who I think was one of America's great poets, William Matthews, at City College for quite a few. I took like 6 semesters. I just took his workshop, and it was just, and I kept trying and failing to write poetry, but it taught me how to choose words, how to choose sentences, how to play with music, how to play with rhyme, how if you do repetition, what repetition is supposed to do. You don't do it by mistake. You do it on purpose. Right. I learned a lot studying how to write poetry and reading poetry too. But the thing is that people always get upset with me because if I'm being interviewed, people look at me and they'll say, "So, in order to write, you have to read a lot, don't you?" And they nod because they're telling you how they want you to answer a question. And I go, "No. I mean." I said, how can that be? And I said, well, Homer, I mean, he arguably he's the guy who starts the novel, right? Homer. And he's both blind and illiterate. There are a lot of illiterate poets throughout history. I mean, just because you read a book doesn't mean you can write a book. I mean, reading is very important, but and a lot of people read, and that comes into their writing. A lot of times it gets in the way of their writing. They're sitting around reading Gogol, who I think was a great novelist, but you don't want to be writing like Gogol. He wrote like Gogol wrote in 1840, which you're doing today. There's telling stories telling stories is it's a talent by itself. Anyway, you were saying?
No. It was just it struck me when you said that about reading Gogol. Like, I know I always avoid people with a tremendous style or a different. I try and read somebody very flat when I'm working on a particular novel. Not a very good writer, just one who isn't offensive, but just will not suddenly be in my brain.
I have friends they're saying, "Oh, well, I'm working on my novel, today," and I said, but I'm trying to do some research, and I said, well, what are you doing? So I'm reading Dostoevsky, and I just look at him and go, really? Like you say, yes, I'm reading Dostoevsky, and it's really wonderful. I say, and I'm thinking, yeah, but you could just write a story, right? Just tell me what happened, and I'd be happy. I don't have to, because really, I mean, one of the reasons I write books like this about writing, one, they're very short because I can't. When I see a book about writing that's 300 pages long, I go, oh my God, and then when they start talking about Shakespeare, like, oh Jesus, I have to be Shakespeare in order to write a book. They do that at universities too. Universities, they say, well, it's not as good as Gide. I'm going, what the fuck is Gide? I do know, but it's like, please. I mean, really, honestly, I mean, I got to do that in order to do this. I'm trying to tell a story. We're having fun here, that's why I love people like Mark Twain. He says, well, writing is easy. All the words are in the dictionary. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Mark Twain wrote this great, I mean, he talk about books about writing. He wrote at one time, he says, the literary offenses of James Fenimore Cooper. It's an essay he wrote. And it's wonderful. Every criticism he has is what you should be doing to write a novel. And he was so incensed by Cooper that 20 years after Cooper died, he wrote the further literary offenses of James Fenimore Cooper. You kind of go, wow, that is so cool. It's like, and these are, really, you should look them up. They're great. I mean, Twain was, he was something else. And he's a writer like no one else. I mean, when you read that stuff, you go, oh my God, that's amazing. But again, I'm not going to try to write Huckleberry Finn. He already wrote it,
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm just going with my questions here.
Okay.
And here, let me also thank you for the fact that this was a slim book.
Uh-huh.
I mean, only because, I just got it 2 days ago. It was very fun to read. And the weird thing is that, I'm not referring to this writer's room that you wrote about, but I had just signed up for the writer's room because I was having trouble writing at home. And so I was reading your book in the writer's room, and about 10 different people were like, are you getting hints from that? And I was like, might be, you know.
Well,
it
sure,
might
why
be.
not?
I didn't feel like telling them anything.
My hint is that it's short. I like that.
Well, you know, one of the things about it being short, and you have it in these chapters about structure and characterization, you know, I found that actually really helpful. And I'd like you to talk, because you say this sentence that I like. You say, story doesn't start out as structure, but slowly assembles itself into et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And you talk about revelation. And I was interested in, you know, I think it's very hard when you write to be self-conscious about, let's say, revelation. But could you talk about that, how structuring a novel, being aware of revelation, what those things are along the way?
Well, you know, revelation, there's another word that kind of sounds like revelation, which is reparation. Which, you know, people start talking about reparations, and then, you know, it's a very difficult topic in America. But what it means, the word means, is basically to repair. And revelation, what it means basically is to reveal. You know, and I think the poem is a lot about that. You know, what he sees in the world reveals something about himself. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, you know, I'm saying that it's both like an extraordinary, but also a very pedestrian thing. Like when you figure out, oh, that's what they were talking about. You know, like you've been having this whole conversation with somebody, and, you know, 2 days or 20 years later, you went, oh, that's what they meant. That's what they were saying. You know, and slowly when you're writing the novel, you come to understand what happened, how it happened, when it happened. You know, that's why I love writing mysteries. When I write a mystery, I just say, well, this guy got killed. I don't know how he got killed. I don't know what was happening. But when I write the novel, I discover it. And I figure if I'm discovering it, then my reader has to be discovering it too. You know, it's that, and that's the way that I feel. You know, all books to one degree or another are a mystery because you don't know everything from the beginning. Even if they tell you everything in the beginning, you still don't understand how that came to be. And so when I'm talking about revelation, that's what I'm talking about. When you reveal what.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are two things you just said that I want to say. One, you said that all books are a mystery in some way, which is almost an exact quote from what Joyce Carol Oates said, that all books contain a mystery. But also, you talk about in this book, you know, different ways to know a character or know a story. You talk about writers who, for example, will write a whole biography of a character to know it.
Yeah.
But what you just talked about, revelation in the process.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Well,
Or the difference of those things? And
there's a character I have named Fearless Jones. I wrote a few novels about him. Yeah, you know, like in the genre, in the crime genre. And recently, I've been kind of putting him in Easy Rawlins novels because I kind of like that. You know, like everyone, you know, because you know, Fearless is the kind of guy you want with you. You know, if you're in trouble. So every once in a while, he's going to do something he calls Fearless, and Fearless says, "Why you call me?" I said, "Well, you know, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, whatever it is bad enough that I had to call you." and one of the things, one novel, Easy's in trouble. These three guys, they're jumping on him. There's no way he's going to get out of it. And Fearless shows up, and Fearless just like knocks all of them out because that's Fearless. And Easy said, "Man, I didn't even know you were here." And he said, "Well, you know, when I was a kid, my uncle used to take me out and we would hunt wild boar with bowie knives. And we would go out there and we had to come up on that boar." He says, "It's not just that you had to, you know, come up on it, but you had to kill him quick because a boar will stomp you to death." And I'm writing this. And I'm going, so that's why Fearless is the way he is. Now, this is like the 6th book I've had Fearless in. I never understood that before. That character, it's always been true. If you go back and read him in other books, you'll see that in all those things. But, you know, it's a moment of discovery for me. Now, some people are not like that. Some people think they need to know everything. My problem with that is that a novel is bigger than your head. Like, you can't think of a whole novel. If the novel's good enough, you can't think of that whole novel. It's hard enough thinking about that poem. You know, think about a whole novel? Like, no, you know. And so the idea that you can know everything before you get involved with it, that's not going to be, you know. And so.
Well, I agree with you, although there are writers who would fight us on this.
I know.
I mean, there was this very successful crime writer who fills like 3 binders of notes before he writes one word. And I said to him, well, what happens if those same 2 characters, you put them, if they went into a different situation, they wouldn't say the same things? And he said, why would I put them in a different situation?
Yeah, no,
So
I
when I was...
don't want to read that book, but that's okay.
No, well,
No, that's all right. It's like, you didn't tell me the name, so I don't have to worry about it. But
I think they're taping this, so I don't want to be in trouble. But I
always want to be in trouble. That's one of the things I realized. Being in trouble is kind of a good thing,
Where were you when I needed you to tell my mother? It was
good that you got in trouble.
I was always in trouble.
That was good for you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to put your characters in trouble all the time. Well, can I go back to something? Because you were saying when I write, you said, all books seem to be a mystery or have a mystery, but when I write a mystery. So do you feel any difference between writing, let's say, a crime genre, specifically crime fiction novel versus something else?
Versus everything else. I mean, and those novels versus each other. But I mean, like for instance, when I wrote the novel, for lack of a better term, science fiction novel, Blue Light, I had in mind that I'm not a spiritual person. I don't believe in anything really, honestly, including the things that I'm supposed to believe in, and. But one thing I believe is that I believe in the soul because I feel like I have one. But I just feel it. And so I needed to write a novel in which a person was going to get right down to the point where their soul is revealed to them. Now, I could write a mystery, but like somebody having a mystery about discovering a soul sounds kind of stupid, and to write, like in quotes, a literary novel, which you in one way you kind of have to believe what people are saying, or they have to believe it in one way. I couldn't do that either because the belief comes at the discovery. And so I said, well, science fiction is the way to go for this. And so I did. I wrote this book, Blue Light. I love that book.
So you had a sort of idea about that book, and then you decided what sort of book it would become. Is that what you're saying?
I started writing, and it turned out that it was that novel. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes I know beforehand. If I write Easy Rollins down, I'm pretty sure what I'm going to be writing about. But a lot of times I just start writing, and it's fun. I just reread a book I wrote 4 years ago that nobody liked, and I didn't like, but I just reread it. And I really liked it. It's like crazy. There's this guy, but he's really an octopus, and and there's this war going on in the world. And I go, wow, that's
why didn't you like it at the time?
I don't know.
I mean, you published it, so...
No, didn't publish it.
Oh, you didn't publish it?
It was in my computer, and I said, oh. Somebody called up from audiobooks, said, we want to publish an audiobook that has never been published before. Do you have one? I went, I don't know, let me look in my computer. And there it was. I like it.
So we can look forward to that?
Yeah, when the guy's an octopus, he'll know.
Yeah, okay. Talking about something that I said before was that this book, if you could say you teach people, and I think you do, but you teach it through storytelling. So I wanted to read the audience one thing so I'm in that writing's room where you're not allowed to breathe, literally.
Okay, good.
So then I started laughing really very loud. So you say here, a character cannot say, I love you without some corroboration in the surrounding prose. For example, whenever Joe saw Josephine, his hands began to quaver and his breath came up short. He would suddenly remember a chore that needed to be done and hurry off. One day, when he saw Josephine standing in the hallway with Janine Murphy, Joe dropped his styrofoam coffee cup and rushed up the stairs, mumbling something about needing to find a mop. Every time I see Mr. Condon, Josephine says, he seems to be running off. I think he likes you, young red-headed Janine said, smiling with her teeth. No, Janine replied, he doesn't even know me. Then with a suggestive, shrewd smile, she added, yet. I just love that because, I mean, you knock this sort of out for this, to give an example of showing how somebody likes someone. Yeah. And did you do that through with all these things in the book? Did they come to you as ideas to illustrate ideas, or did you have them tucked away somewhere
Oh,
like
no,
the
no,
octopus
I
story?
just made them up while I was writing it. It was, it's fun because there's a way, and if you do it, if you just throw it out there, there's mistakes to it, and it doesn't quite work, and it's my, and you go, wow, but that's what it's like writing. And so I want to give you an example. And in this example, he loves her, or he feels about her in one way, she feels about him in a whole other way, and then because it goes on, in the end, it doesn't work, I mean, that's the thing, the idea, right? Because, the idea about being in love, right? Everybody thinks, if somebody says they love you, that you understand what they mean. And of course, usually you don't, or you think that they don't mean it. Like, no, they just want to have sex with me. And that might be true. That might be why they're saying it. But there are other people who actually love you, and you actually love them. But it's hardly ever the same feeling. The great thing about writing is you can get into that. In real life, you don't discover it until the divorce. I thought he was somebody else. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
He was.
Yeah. That took me a minute. Can you talk a little bit about what you call writing about the negative spaces in a novel? Or is that a bad question?
It's a hard
It's
question.
a hard question. Here, it's on page 37. Here's this.
Yeah.
I believe to attempt to tell a story from its negative spaces, now I'll give you the subclause, to allow the reader to wonder what is real before you reveal the truth.
Wow.
That's good.
That sounds smart.
I underlined it.
Yeah. Look, the thing about the negative space is that's what defines the novel, or the painting, or the music, whatever. Wherever there's a silence, wherever there's something that's not what you're supposed to be looking at, that's what defines it. And actually, I forgot what I was saying there, but what I mean to say is that the world that we're in, the place that our characters inhabit, the things that our characters don't say, don't do, the things that we don't know, those are things that define that character, when and if those things are revealed.
Yeah. Well, as a writer then,
Yeah.
and let's say you're going back and rewriting and looking at a character when you might discover something like that, do you, particularly let's say in a crime novel, do you think about holding off those reveals and how you're going to play with that and structure that and tell the reader or let the reader surmise it?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and really, I just finished this a new Easy Rawlins novel, and it's and I read it like about 2 weeks ago. I read it and I went, wow, the mystery doesn't work. It was so funny to me. I went, wow, it's not working. What I say happens at the end couldn't have happened the way I say it, and so I had to go back. And I had such an exciting experience because, I had, written a kind of an outline for the novel. And I realized after I finished it, I had to write a second outline. And I actually wrote that at the top. I said, the second outline. And I went in and I outlined what the mystery, how it had to work. And in doing that, I actually changed things that happened, changed events that characters did. It was really fun, and I think that a lot of people say, "Well, I want it to be over now," and and I wanted it to be over, but it wasn't over. I'm just like, it's okay, it's not over, so you have to go back and you have to work it through.
So you do some outlining along the way as
sometimes,
you,
yeah, not always, but sometimes I do. Not with the Octopus Man. I didn't outline that at all. But I was happy when I got to the end. Devil in a Blue Dress, I didn't outline.
You didn't?
No, I just wrote it, and I didn't know it was a mystery until I was about 100 pages into it. I went, wow, this feels like a mystery.
Did you have many drafts of that before you ended up with that book? Since it's
maybe like 15, 20, drafts of it. Yeah.
When you realized it was a mystery, did it change the way you had to write it or felt about it, or
not really, because it really was a mystery. It wasn't like, wow, it wants to be a mystery. It like actually was a mystery. I said, wow, he has a job. Guys hired him. He's figuring out. But then it was about being a black man in Los Angeles in 1948 and not really liking working for people because people don't treat you right. and then he had a job for somebody else who didn't treat him right, who had to be killed in the end. I don't know if nobody in here has read it, but somebody's read it.
Don't forget
they kill
that
him.
part.
Yeah, they kill him at the end.
Did you realize, or did you want Easy to become a continuing character, or how did that happen?
I didn't. The first book I wrote, I was taking a writing class with who I think is the greatest living writer in the English language, Edna O'Brien. Yeah. And I'm studying with Edna. I was so in love with her. And one day she goes, "Walter, write a novel." She was imperious, write a novel. And I went, okay. And I went home and I wrote a novel. I mean, really, honestly, 6 weeks. It took me 6 weeks to write this novel. Usually I only write pornography that fast. But 6 weeks, I write this novel, and it's called, Gone Fishing. Published it with Black Classic Press, a few years after I started publishing. And I sent it out, and people got it, and they all wrote back and they said, look, this is very good. This good writing is very good. We like it, but it's not commercial. And finally, I figured out not commercial meant that white people didn't read about black people, black women didn't like black men, and black men didn't read. So who are we going to sell your novel to?
White men don't read either.
Huh?
White men don't read either.
Yeah, but they don't. They just don't care about black people. So it didn't matter whether they read or they didn't read. They might read Moby Dick, which has black people in it, but they weren't right, and they were right because they were right because they were people publishing. They weren't publishing me because, And then I said, well, okay, I'll write another book about Easy and Mouse because they were in that book, and then I'm writing it, and I go, well, wow, this is a mystery. And so I wasn't thinking then I was going to write a whole bunch of mysteries, but when I went to Norton to sell it to them, they said, well, we'll buy it, but you got to give us another one too. So that actually set me up. Well, okay, I'm writing mysteries now about Easy Rawlins, which was fine. I had to, I always have to leave my publishers. I have one of my publishers is sitting in front of us, and Morgan Intrigan here is like the only publisher I've had in the mainstream who hasn't asked me for an Easy Rawlins novel, only ever, right? And it's like because I write an Easy Rawlins, and then I write another one. I said, well, now I'm going to write Blue Light, the science fiction novel, or now I'm going to write, something else. And they say, well, okay, if you sell us another, mystery. And then after that, I have to go to another. I got to go to another publisher, and they say, Easy Rawlins? I say, well, yes, if I can write another book. And they go, okay, And that happens again and again and again and again. I've had so many publishers.
But it seems like you want to keep writing Easy.
Well, I like writing Easy. I just can't write, Easy forever. I mean, all these people, when you read, who do it, that's all they do. The books get really bad after a while. I mean, my God, from Parker to Rex Stout to, really. I mean, if you can't recharge by doing something original, I have to go to people and say, I'm writing a novel about the blues. And they go, the blues? Who's going to read that? I said, man, it doesn't matter. I'm writing a novel. Are you a publisher? Are you trying to make money? I mean, because you don't make a lot of money doing books. Really, you don't. I mean, you can't. I mean, books. If you follow how everything else has gone up in price, books should cost like $80 each. But they can't do that. So they're actually making less money.
Do you mind if I segue for a second? That's not it.
It's in there.
That was your resume, which I didn't read all of it because you were late.
Oh, that's good. I was late.
So I was very.
They were early.
They were early, and they waited. They were
so
really
nice.
So
Nice.
do you mind if we talk about this Times op-ed piece you wrote, Why I Quit the Writer's Room? Because it's tangential because it is about language.
Do you know what my original title for that was? That I sent to them that they said, I'm sorry, Walt.
I'm dying to hear it.
My title was The Nigger in the Room. And they were like...
So it was like just what you're writing about, though, in a way, right?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Well, I thought this was a very important thing to write. I mean, and so I'm sure you've gotten a lot of reaction to it.
A lot, yeah. People respond to The Nigger in the Room. I was in a writer's room. Not Snowfall. I'm in Snowfall kind of forever, but thanks. But like I was in a writer's room, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was okay. There was some discomfort, but I hate working, so it's always I don't know about discomfort.
You got to quit.
Oh my God! But then one day I get a call from HR, and they called up and they said, "We hear that you used the N word in the writers' room." And I said, "Well, I am the N word in the writers' room." And they said, "You can't use that word." I just want you to understand. I'm much more insulted by somebody coming up to me and saying N-word than saying nigger. I mean, really, honestly. Nigger doesn't bother me at all. And nigger bothers me some, but, it's like, but you can come up and say N-word. You can say that as much as you want. N-word, N-word. The guy on the phone told me that if you said the C word, and I'm going, oh yeah, uh-huh. We would fire you like that. And I was so mad. I just went home. I didn't even talk to anybody. I just left. I went home. Where's Walter? Oh. And I never came back, and I wanted to write about it because I thought I lived in America, and in America you have two things: freedom of speech and the right to pursue happiness. Right? These are the two things we have that are worth anything. I mean, bearing arms too, but yeah, free speech and the right to pursue happiness. And what they were saying is, either you're silent or you're unemployed. And unemployed means unhappy, right? I mean, unemployed is unhappy for 99.99% of the people. And so I had a choice of silence, or poverty. But it's not me, poverty. I mean, I have money, I have to be in the room, I like the money they pay because they pay good in those rooms. But I just, and then I put it in the Times. I just sent it out 2 months ago or 2.5 months ago, and they waited to put it in the paper like the same week my book came out. That was really good. I don't know if Morgan had any, control over that, but and it's been everywhere. I mean, I was on page 6. I can't even believe it, on page 6, and I, didn't even have to take my penis out or anything.
Well,
I mean, it's like wild.
That might have gotten you out of that writer's room too. Maybe.
Yes, and I would have understood that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have written an op-ed piece. Somebody else would have written that op-ed piece. Mm-hmm. But I wrote it, and I really felt it. I said, and they said, well, would you let a white person say that? Because, I told a story. My story was, many years before in Los Angeles, I'm walking down Robertson, and a policeman stops me, pulls me over to the car, and he goes through my pockets, and he asks me these questions, and he goes through my pockets again, like that stop and search. I never even understood it. I said, don't everybody do that? And he asked me these questions again and again. And finally he said, okay, you can go. And I said, excuse me, officer, I just need to ask you a question. He goes, what? I said, why did you stop me? I'm just walking down the street. I wasn't doing anything. No, nobody, And he goes, listen, if I see a nigger in a Patty neighborhood, I stop him. And if I see a Patty in a nigger neighborhood, I stop him, because usually they're up to no good. That's the story I told. I didn't call anybody a name. I didn't say, the policeman said, if I see an N-word, it would be so ridiculous, because then it would be okay, right? But I'm a writer, right? I know that if I say N-word, it's not going to have any impact, because that's free for them, And I was enraged at that, and I've gotten really dozens of things. I know a young African American woman. She was in a room, a writer's room, and she's speaking to a white showrunner, and she says, well, as a black woman, and the white showrunner goes, as an African American woman. And it doesn't sound bad, right? Except for you can't correct her. She's your boss, right? But I would correct her if she says such a thing to me, especially if I was an African American woman. I said, no, African American man. No, nigga. No, it's like, I mean, really, what do you, the whole idea that language can destroy you? It's ridiculous, And I know that it's not HR itself, but the people who tell HR what the rules are. It's not like somebody voted on these rules. Some, probably guy, probably white, sitting behind a desk says, I don't want to get in trouble. So if anybody says this, we have to get rid of them. We have, because I don't want somebody coming suing me, And so I didn't want to go. I didn't want to sue them. I could have, and I didn't. And what I said instead was, I'm gonna put it in the newspaper and let the newspaper mess with them.
So have you heard from people in that writers' room that you were working with?
Well, I know a couple of people from there, and but we it hasn't been a discussion. I've never heard from anybody since I left the room. Nobody's asked me, called me up,
But somebody in that room had to tell HR.
Yeah, somebody did. I don't know who. And that's the other thing. It's like McCarthyism, right? Like somebody has said, it's been reported. Somebody, Elia Kazan called up, and I'm like, God damn, it's like, it really, because really, what they should do is say, hey, listen, there's somebody who's upset. We should get together and have a conversation. And you should sit down with the person and have a conversation. I mean, you don't sit there and say, I'm going to tell, it's like, this is kind of crazy. Like an adult saying, it could have, there are other black people in the room. It could have been one of them. It could have been, any person could have said it. I don't know. All I know is that, it was crazy. That, and so, that's been, for the last week, that's been a lot in my life. And I was on like 3 radio shows this morning, talking about it. And it's like, I was on this radio. They could tell that I must have really done it because, like, the guy said, well, did you tell HR that they should put you in a room and talk with somebody? I said, man, that's their fucking job. Not my job. It's like, come on. It's like, what? It's like, I got to tell HR how to be HR. But HR doesn't have a choice because their boss is saying, we better not hear the thing or otherwise you're going to be fired, There was an essay written by a white guy, sadly, by a white guy in 1967 called Student as Nigger. You ever see this essay? It was a great essay, because everybody works for somebody else. Everybody is answerable to everybody else. And if you don't give them the right answer, they fire you. And it's true, And so I'm willing to, somebody says, well, if some white person used that word, would you be upset? I said, yes, I would be upset. And if I was upset enough, I would say something about it. But my language making you uncomfortable or your language making me uncomfortable, one of the things I say in the essay, I said, look, I don't like the Confederate flag. I don't like what it means, what it stands for. But I was once having a meeting with these people and said, we should make that flag illegal. And I said, no, man, don't you realize we live in America? You can't tell a man that his flag is illegal. You don't like it. I don't like it. But, I would rather see it, on his forehead than not see it on his forehead. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. You learn, by people talking. And sometimes you even solve problems by people talking.
I thought one of the interesting things, when I read it, I thought, gee, this could be used by the other side.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to defend.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
But I think what the problem is thinking of them as the other side.
Yeah, of course.
Because listen, all those white people in the Midwest are suffering not because they think it's me. They think it's many people in this room that are taking their jobs and taking their money and making fun of them. It is true we make fun of them, but and maybe shouldn't. But the thing is that what we need to do is convince these people that we're working together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to ask you one last craft question, and then I'll ask the audience to ask you questions.
Yes.
Yes. So one of the things you write here, it's toward the end, you said that the way you wrote this book was the way you would often write a novel, which would be you would be floundering, flailing, and frustrated, and that you wrote this book in the same kind of. And I don't totally agree because it's not a haphazard book, which you obviously came back and organized it. But you do have in this the kind of not groping for, but trying to find these reasons and these structures, which is very interesting. In other words, this becomes analogous to what you're writing about rather than it being a manual.
Yeah, I think that, because, manuals are so, well, they're uninteresting. And also, if somebody like say, well, first you do this, and then you do that, and then you do this, and then you come back and you do this, and then you do that. It's so dry that it's not like you haven't had I told you what to do, but I haven't given you any kind of like real feel for it. And what this book is meant to do is give you a feel for writing, what it's like, which is why I have all those examples, and I say, oh, yeah, I'll write something. I say, well, it's like this. I say, well, but maybe that doesn't work. So maybe you could write it like that. Well, that's not so good. Well, maybe, so maybe if you did that, I said, well, that's really good, but it still doesn't work. So then, and then that's writing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say that the microphone will be passed through the question, but anybody who's writing, even people who aren't writing, should read this because not only are there things that you can take away, but it's tremendous fun in terms of, you don't make writing feel like you want to kill yourself, like sometimes you do. So it's really a terrifically great read as well. So, questions? Really?
Wow, this is like so cool, But people never ask questions.
I know. So the first person has to ask one. There's got to be. I'm looking at the people I know, like trying to give them hey.
Who wrote the poem that you read? I missed the name of
What's it's a right.
I'll read it to you. Let's see. I'll
It's
find it.
okay. In my head, it's right, and I keep on wanting to say Richard, but it's not Richard. It's James Wright.
James Wright. Okay.
It's a nice poem.
It's a beautiful poem, and I thought it was interesting to find a poem in the middle of a book about writing fiction, because it also blended the whole idea of different ideas about writing.
Well, the idea of anything, not any language that humans use, not somehow using poetry is just it's impossible.
Here's what I want to say. This is your opportunity to ask Walter Mosley a question, because then he's going to leave. And you'll go home and you'll have this. I should
ask him that question.
Yeah,
and
it's like
I need
rewriting.
$5, Mr. Mosley.
So
And
ask
I hear
him
you
about
got it
craft.
from that
Ask him
writer's
about
room.
his book. Oh, yes.
Was writing always a fun experience?
Yeah. I mean, I started very late. I started writing when I was like 34, and and I'm writing, and I just it was so much fun. I mean, even the bad writing was fun. I guess that's the thing. People who I don't really look that far ahead. I don't imagine a book ending. I just imagine being in the book. Sometimes I go, God, I've been in this book a long time. One book, John Woman. I was 20 years in the writing of that book. But no, I've always really loved writing. Really loved it. Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Mosley, to get into setting in the book, I haven't gotten to that.
To setting, you mean?
Setting, yes.
I talk a lot in the book about how you have to choose just the smallest things that are going to give you the feeling of a place, of a place. So I start off by trying to describe a man in a white hospital room in a white bed who's in a coma. I said, that must be easy. But there's so many things happening in that room. There's so much going on that I say you have to take just the point. And so then I jumped out of that and I say, okay, now you have three characters who are running into each other in Grand Central Station at rush hour. How are you going to set up Grand Central Station? There's a child looking at his mother, and that's all he sees, and that's all he's thinking about. There's another guy trying to pickpocket somebody. There's one of my characters is a woman. There's a guy walking by, looking at her, and she asks him a question and he won't answer it. What you do is say, you just take enough of it that whoever has been in Grand Central Station is going to feel it, and you go no further. Yeah. It's a hard thing to do, but I think that it's once you know that's what you have to do, it becomes a much easier task.
Do you feel? Oh, sorry, please.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second so we can hear you.
Because they want
Thanks.
it recorded forever.
Yeah.
So don't admit to anything.
Hi, I want to know because I'm a writer and there's so much other things I could do in the world that are so much funner than writing because writing is kind of hard. And what motivates you to stay in the chair even though you don't want to be in the chair to write?
Well, I don't know if I don't want to be in the chair. However, there are things that make writing infinitely easier. One of them is to write every day. Every day. There's no vacations, there's no weekends, it's every day, 7 days a week. But on top of that, then you don't have to write that long. 2 hours is fine. You know, 3 is for me is optimal, and you just do it every day. And as you're doing it, you write 3 hours, then there's 21 hours that your unconscious is working. You wake up the next day, you start writing, you went, wow, there's all these new ideas. And one day after the next, those ideas grow and grow and grow. Now, I don't know, maybe you do this already. But for me, then I don't have to be hard on myself about anything else. What I wrote might work, it might not work, the language is good, it might not be good, it doesn't matter. Because I'm on the road, I'm gonna get there. And that's, so that keeps me in the chair because I know what I'm doing. Quincy Troop once said, somebody asked Quincy, they said, do you write every day? He says, well, I sit in front of my computer every day. And if a poem comes, I catch it, And that's kind of, I thought that was kind of perfect.
It's great.
It was, yes. You?
And then
Smain back. Yeah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Good. I was wondering how you wound up in the writer's room for Snowfall. That's the first question.
Okay.
And the second question has to do with Easy Rollins and Devil in the Blue Dress. I thought at one point that the films were going to turn into a series.
Uh-huh.
What happened to that?
Uh-huh. Okay, getting in the room for Snowfall, it's very simple. I was sitting in my house and John Singleton called me and he said, Walter, I'm doing this new show called Snowfall and I need people who know what Los Angeles is, were there at the time, and who can talk about it. And I said, okay, John. I said, but I never wrote for television. He said, you don't have to write, just come in the room. We just sit there. They'll pay you to sit there and be an advisor. And for the first 2 years, I was an advisor, and then I started writing for the show. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there should be more Easy Rollins. It's so interesting because that film made a lot of money for them. However, it didn't make that money in the box office. In the box office, it did more than break even, but it they made a couple of $1 million. The guy said, anybody who owns the studio said, I can't even put a swimming pool in my house for a couple $1 million. They said, you got to make me $50 million, especially if there's going to be black people there, because who knows what's going to happen with that. And so, I keep trying, and there's right now it's out to them again, and maybe I'll be able to do. What I want to do is start from the beginning, do Devil over again, remake Devil, and then do a series after that.
It feels like a perfect television series nowadays.
But it sounds like it is, but nobody really. So we'd like it, but could we not do Easy Rollins not period? Could we? Does Mouse have to be? Can he be Mexican? It's like.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for writing fiction for somebody who's only written nonfiction before?
It's an interesting question. It's a long discussion because nonfiction, is that historical nonfiction? Is it describing how machines work? Is it there's all kinds of nonfiction, but I honestly believe that there's not that much difference between fiction and nonfiction, except for nonfiction, is a lot of lies. It's interesting. Most people think that nonfiction tells the truth, but if you start off in the book saying, well, this is real, and in your head, well, in order to describe it, it's going to be 10,000 pages, and you only write 200 of those pages, then you left out, 9,800 pages of facts. So whatever you say is not true. It's like two different biographers writing about Ronald Reagan. The conservative one, he's the greatest guy you ever heard of. The left wing one is, he's the worst monster that ever existed. And everything they say is true, right? It's like, so how does that work? I think that if you're writing nonfiction, you're telling a story. You're starting somewhere and you're getting somewhere. And that's the same thing in fiction. I think that if you use just that template, it's going to work. And the great thing about it is, though, you're making up everything, so everything you say is true, and there's nothing left out. Yes, he's going to get to you, but not immediately.
I was wondering, do you write characters based on people you know that people you know may have recognized themselves in your work?
You know, are you asking that question because you're a writer? And are you afraid that you're writing about people and they're gonna be mad at you? That motherfucker stole my money. That kind of stuff, or things about maybe your mother or your brother or things like that.
Maybe my family, but a lot of what I think happening around me and the place that I'm from, it's something people don't really talk about. So I think that I hear things and I think, wow, I just wonder like, how did that happen to you? And I imagine what may have led to this happening. So there may be a situation that people know about.
And they won't recognize it. And mostly they won't recognize it. Mostly they'll read it. And my father, listen, everybody told me Easy Rawlins is based on my father. So I give him the book. He reads the book. And he said, Walter, people tell me I'm in this book. And I say, yeah, Dad. What do you think? He said, I don't see it. That's a whole other guy. I think that, you write, what you write. And maybe somebody will recognize it. They're just as likely to say that's me and it isn't them. You know what I mean? And so, it's just it's a thing, I put Frank Sinatra in this new Easy Rawlins novel. I guess Frank Sinatra, if he was alive, would think it's him because it has his name. But, most of the times people don't. And if they do, so what? Edna O'Brien told me that when she wrote The Country Girls, her mother lives like out, in the country in Ireland. It's like living 500 years in the past if you live there. And so, Edna sent her the book. She never responded, never said anything about it. Her mother died, and she goes to the house, and she finds the book in the attic at the bottom of a basket of clothes. And her mother had gone through the book, and with a dark black pen had crossed out every sex adventure and every curse word. So if you have that kind of reader, maybe, But even then, when Edna told me about it, I said, well, she was trying to save your soul, Edna. She was trying to make the book that God read would be okay, I'm answering you, right? Okay. Somebody in the back was talking. There's a woman right there in the white jacket right there.
There's going to be 2 more questions for the night.
Okay.
Hi, how are you? So I have a short story I've been working on for, I guess, almost a year now. Trying to get it published too, and it's been workshopped a couple times, like 2 different workshops. I pitched it a couple places, gotten a couple rejections. One place said, "Oh, we really like it. We think it still needs some more revisions." And I'm just kind of like, thought it was done, but if this place says it needs more work, then maybe. And I'm kind of like, I guess this is a how do I know when it's finished question / what do I do with it if I'm okay with it, but other places don't seem to be okay with it.
And so you've been sending it out,
Yes.
and people come back and say what?
I've gotten a couple rejections, and one outlet said, we really like it, but we think it needs more work. I just don't have time to work on it with you right now.
Well, just listen, this is not uncommon. I just want to say, I published 57 books, 58 now, I guess, and John Woman was the one just before this one, and I think I must have sent it to 15 or 16 people who rejected it before I got it published with Morgan here. And one of the people I sent it to said, Mr. Mosley, we're not going to publish this, but if you'd like to come and meet with me and sit down, I think I can explain to you what a novel is. So you can feel bad about it. Write another story.
Yeah.
Write another story and keep sending this one out, and then start sending that one out, and then write another story. Just keep doing it. You shouldn't stop writing stories until at least you have like 12 or 14 of them,
It's good. So there's
And can we do this? Can we do this woman here in the white jacket? And back there. Because you were gonna say?
No.
Okay.
I'm good.
No, now I'm very, shy about my question, but the question was about point of view, and it came up sort of bouncing off of the nonfiction versus fiction question. Because I was, if you write nonfiction, you sort of announce your point of view, ahead of time, or at least the publication.
Nonfiction is a really easy place to do a second. First person, second person, third person, and you hardly ever use second person in a novel, but. Second person when they say you're the second person. They go, well, you walk into the room, you sit down in the chair, you look at this computer and you don't know what to do. But here, I'm going to tell you, and you go like that. First and third are the ones that I'm most interested in. There's also the universal, which is basically God, which is a difficult thing. Some people I know have that arrogance to them, but I don't. And and first is really wonderful. It just has to be interesting. So whoever your character is that you're sticking with, the reader's going to have to want to listen to them. They can't be boring. I remember Jay Perini was reading a novel. I was at Breadloaf, a place that I hated, and I came in and I sat down like there. I should have sat there, but I sat there. And he said, "I'm going to," and he was like, one of the big guys, so they would read for an hour. And he said, "Now I'm going to read from this. In this thing. It's like Tolstoy's Last Day or something like that." And he said, "This chapter I've written is from the point of view of the maid in the house. She's 60 years old, not educated, not intelligent, and not interesting." And I just said to myself, I went, no. And he read for an hour from that point of view, and I sat there thinking, I can't just stand up and walk out, like I hadn't even had a book published yet. I might never get a book published because I didn't know how powerful, Jay Perini was, and God, that was awful. I learned something there, but not, in the negative space. I was right. You have to write from so then you can go to third person, and third person is like this narrator that's on the shoulder, and it might stay on one person's shoulder for the whole novel because that person might not be interesting, but what they experience is interesting, or it could jump from shoulder to shoulder. I'm talking to you, and then when you leave, it jumps to your shoulder, and it follows you out there, and that's also another interesting way, It depends on what's the best voice you think for your novel. Does that kind of answer what you're? Yeah. All right. Good.
So I think I don't know. We're out of time, but I'm sure you're really happy you hung around, right? And not only want to thank Walter for being so open and brilliant and terrific and funny, but stay a little longer and buy the book. And then, even though you're not supposed to do this, you can sneak a very small question in when he's signing.
That's absolutely true. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.